Alright gang, it's been quite a while since I've done a full garden tour, so let's get to it and I'll show you all the things that have changed and what I'm improving on, what I'm messing up, and all of that. Let's get to it. So right here at the porch, I have finally set up a workstation for myself so that I'm not just working off the ground, sitting on the ground doing stuff like repotting and setting up seed trays and stuff. I've got some seed trays that I prepped for a new round of sowing right here. And I've set out all these pretty decent looking cuttings from my dragon fruit. I did a big pruning on them. I'll show that off later on. They're across the yard over here. Ooh, I wanted to start with this because it's fun for me. So right here, this is a more spiny variety of chayote. But if you've ever thought about growing chayote and weren't sure how to do it, it's pretty simple. You just plop the fruit, or it's used as a vegetable, whatever. You just plop it on the soil, because a chayote doesn't necessarily have a seed, it is the seed, and it's going to send roots and its sprout out from the base, and it'll grow straight into the soil, and that's basically how they grow. I can show you if I can do this here. These ones are kind of iffy to grab because they're spiny. So right here, you can see all the roots that it's got. So you don't have to do it this way. You can just plop the thing down in your raised bed or in the soil or wherever it is. And you don't even have to bury it. You can partially bury it, or just like I did here, I just placed it on top and it sent its roots down and is sending its shoots upward. So it has, it's a type of squash, so it's going to have little tendrils. You can see one right here. It's going to attach itself to whatever it feels like and start growing. And it's that simple. So this is one thing that I'm experimenting with right now. I preferred the taste of the spiny ones versus the smooth ones, so that's why I'm focusing on this. But I hope to have some success with this going forward. I've had a few false starts and failures, but you know, you keep trying with this sort of stuff. So that's planting chayote. And then right here I have some baby pineapples that I've taken off of some more adult ones. I have a big row of them here, and these are all from pineapple tops that, you know, because growing pineapple is that easy. You just root the top, and then when it's rooted you can plant it. Or if you want to just plant the pineapple top, then hopefully it roots. I work at a grocery store, so I brought home a ton of discarded pineapple tops, probably 40 to 50, and so I got to experiment with getting it to work on my own. So there's like, I don't know, at least a dozen here. And then as these ones became established, some of them started to put off little pups. So that's what these ones are here. So I'm trialing, rooting them in smaller containers. So I got them in these little cups. Oh, and then this was a Ecuador Pelora yellow dragon fruit that I grew from seed. It's getting kind of yellow right here, so that's a little concerning, but I think it'll turn around, and I can probably take some cuttings from this as it matures. They're a little small and tender right now, so I'm trying not to stress it out. And then, talking about failures, I got some dill right here that I killed. So, first on the list. This is where I mix my soil too. That's another big thing that I've started to do. Is a lot of my failures have come from using cheap soil that you can just get at the big box store. But I've started to mix my own, and I got this kind of drill attachment here that really helps out, so that's great. And then let me show you my other failures. I think it's good to talk about your failures and what you're learning from them. I'm not even sure this is necessarily a failure. It's just how it is. I have a lot of seedlings that are petering out here that I haven't had the chance to put out, or I just sowed them at the wrong time because I didn't have the time, or whatever it was. Anyway, I got a lot of stuff dying here, a lot of stuff getting attacked by bugs that may not be salvageable. Lots of tomatoes that have gotten sick, so they're a little past their time when I could have made it work for them. There's probably a few in here that I could still make work, but I've already got some tomato plants out in the garden that have given me some fruit, so it is what it is. And then I have, so these are some tamarind that I planted from seed quite a while back, and they have proven to be a very resilient plant. I have heard that tamarind trees can live for hundreds of years. So these were just out exposed to the winter one year, just wind chills, all of that, and they're fine. I have repotted them since then, and they are taking off. There's a couple that are still kind of small, but they'll catch up. And then I got some sweet potato cuttings that I took from my main plant across the yard, and I'm getting those rooted up and still deciding on where I'm going to put them. And you don't have to do this. I'm just trialing it to get a better feel for how it works. From what I understand, sweet potato can grow so easily and take over an area. I probably could have just taken a big chunk of vine and buried it somewhere, and it probably would have taken off. But I'm trying it this way because I want to increase my chance of success with it. And then down here I have a bunch of passion fruit that I grew from seed, and I haven't decided on what I'm going to do with it or where I'm going to put it yet. It was kind of just an experiment to see if I could make it work. So that's a lot of what I have going on, is just experimenting with different things and seeing what happens. Speaking of which, right over here I have a pretty fun experiment, I would say. I built a little quote-unquote pond out of a tote just to try and understand these systems better, and I have learned quite a lot. So firstly, what I've got going on here with this mesh, I had this all built out, and a raccoon came and just completely destroyed this. It climbed into it, started tearing apart plants, totally messed up the structure. It tipped over this bamboo fountain. So I have this kind of cage over it as a deterrent now. But let me explain what's going on here. So there is a little solar panel right here. It's not running at the moment because the sun isn't directly on it. Let me see if I can get it to work. So the water runs, and this also facilitates aerating the water a bit. I know a lot of people in their ponds, they will have an active like aeration or filtration or whatever it is to ensure that their pond is healthy and the water is clean. I have quite a lot of plants in here, and I actually need to get rid of some of this duckweed because it's covering all the water at this point. It's really taken over. But the water has been pretty darn clean, I think, because of all the plants. And so let's see if I can get it to work. So this little pump has a splitter, and it runs and runs and runs and will fill up this bamboo fountain here. Come on. You can see it trickling in. So eventually, this bamboo fountain will do the clonking noise. I think I need to clean that the spout where the water's coming out. So there it was. Yeah, I think I need to clean this because you can see that it's only coming out of some of the holes. Anyway. So it doesn't run at all times because the sun's not always on it, but I have found that to be sufficient. So the other things that I've got going on here are my roommate just added this little jar, and you kind of, this is a trick you can do where you just plunge the jar below the surface and then pull it up, and the water will be stuck inside it because it's a vacuum. So I do have little minnow fish in here, and they will swim up into the jar and just be hanging out. It's kind of cute. Let me see if I can find some of them. So I have some lily pads here, and obviously the abundance of duckweed. And then there's like some water lettuce. Yeah, I guess we're not going to see any right now. I saw some earlier. There's also an abundance of like little snails and stuff in here. They're kind of funny to watch, especially when they're swimming, because they just look like a little slug or snail like moving across the surface of the water. It's pretty silly looking. Oh, there it goes. And I've got a taro right here. Anyway, this has been a fun project for me. Trying to set up these systems and getting a better feel for them. Because one day I want to have a bigger pond, of course. So starting to get a feel for it with this smaller scale version has been a fun experiment. So anyway, let me move on. So right here I have the ribes. These are a gooseberry, and I have two types of currants. And I think the last time I showed these, they were maybe half this size. This one's growing in a weird way. It's got this like right angle on it, one of its branches. I got one little tiny fruit on the gooseberry earlier this year, but they're still getting established. And this is not quite the climate that they're used to. They're more of a cooler climate, as I understand it. So if they can do anything here, then that'll be interesting. So right over here, my strawberry patch, quote unquote. So I've gone through tons of different iterations of trying to grow strawberries, and I've finally settled on this one for the time being. They're kind of like rows. So I'm trialing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of strawberries. This one's an heirloom variety. This one's kind of a, I wouldn't say heirloom, it's more of a wild variety. They are generally smaller. And then these ones are more heading towards the commercial side where they produce quite heavily. And I think after trying all of these ones, the one that has really been the strongest one in terms of producing and survival has been the quinault. It gets really big berries, and so it was like a 90-degree day today, so this is really droopy. But the quinault has been a really resilient variety for me. So I think going forward, I'll probably favor that one over some of these other ones. Like we got the Albion and the Seascape. All of the Seascape died back. We got one over here. I'll have these other varieties for a little bit longer to see how they fare. But I think my time experimenting with different varieties of strawberries has shown me that it's not as interesting as I thought it would be. I've learned a lot from it, so I think that's important. But at this point, I'm more interested in getting the crop than I am interested in seeing how the different varieties grow. So I'm just picking off some dying leaves. So strawberries, I've learned, are you really want to clean up the plants because it suffers from having partially dead leaves. It's more prone to disease, and it's just not efficient for the plant to have all these partially yellowed leaves. It's not serving it. You might as well just take them out, and you're going to have a much healthier plant for it. So there's a lot of things that I've learned about them. I would certainly not say I'm a strawberry expert, far from it, but I've come a long way in terms of learning to grow them. I may eventually change up this system too, because I learned about there's a method, I'm forgetting his name, but he made this method called rain gutter gardening, and I'm kind of bouncing off of that a little bit, and this is not quite rain gutter gardening, it's just kind of rows, but I may transition more towards that because it seems to be very, very efficient for growing strawberries. So I thought I would mention that. So moving on, oh yes, I do want to talk about the mulch that I'm using. I was using a straw mulch for a while. I was going just to a farm supply store and getting like straw bales, but over time I learned that straw, if you can't find out how it was grown, it might have persistent herbicides in it that can negatively impact your garden. So I have stopped using those ones and transitioned to using this is more of a wood mulch. This I got from my city. They have like free compost and free mulch. This is, I believe, a forest mulch. I think that means that not forest mulch, orchard mulch. I imagine that means that it came from orchards and they just mulched it. So it clumps really well, similar to how straw mulch clumps, and I really appreciate that, because that's one of the things that I really appreciated about the straw mulch, is that it wouldn't blow away in the wind. You know, like if you want to use leaves as a mulch, that's great, but sometimes they just blow away and you got a mess to clean up. So right now I really like the wood mulch. So that's another option out there if you're not 100% on board with the straw mulch. And I got this for free from my city and have mulched my whole garden with it. And if you didn't know already, mulching is one of the best ways to reduce your need for watering, because it insulates the soil and protects it from the sun and heat and kind of maintains that moisture level, and it'll also help protect the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. And that's just a few reasons among a myriad of others. Anyway, starting to ramble. So that's the mulch I'm using right now. The next thing I want to talk about is these watering spikes that I've got all around the garden. So I have a lot of potted plants, and at some point, hasn't happened yet, but at some point I'm going to get some drip set up. But right now I move a lot of things around, and the watering spikes have turned out to be a really nice solution for keeping things pretty decently watered, especially right now. So this is a tamarillo plant that's kind of getting buffeted by pests and the heat right now, and it is not a fan, so I might have to move it. They are not, as I understand it, a fan of this heat. Anyway, back to the spikes. So you may have heard of something called an Oya, which is basically a terracotta like vase that is buried in soil. And I really liked that concept because you can come along and fill up this buried vase, and water is going to wick from it into the soil and basically be a self-watering system. So this is kind of an inverted Oya. There is a terracotta spike here, and I just have a bottle, an old wine bottle, sticking out of it. And this has been a very nice solution to... So I couldn't put an Oya in a pot like this. I mean, I could, but, you know, after the fact, after the pot's already set up and established, burying an Oya in here would be a bit of an annoyance. So I've got these spikes, and it's basically the opposite thing. The vessel of it is above the ground, and you kind of have a visual aid for when you need to refill it. And you know, I got free bottles because I have a wine fan living here. So I get free bottles over time, and I'm slowly filling out the number of watering spikes that I have all over the garden. Here's some more. One right there. And as I said, I do want to get drips set up in the garden, but it's not going to be a perfect solution in all cases. So this is kind of another tool in the chest, so to speak. It's the opposite of an Oya in some ways. The vessel's above the ground. You can see what's going on here with the water level. And if I want to move stuff around, I can do so without having to redesign a drip system. And the other thing that I've found I really like about these is it's taught me a lot about how much water different plants are using. So I have some here. This is a strawberry guava. It's producing heavily right now. And I bet you this is empty. Oh, it's not, but maybe every 3 days I come out here and this bottle is empty because it's just a really heavy drinker right now because it's producing all this fruit. So this has been a great indicator on teaching me how much particular plants' water usage has been. So right here, we got a banana, and this one doesn't use quite as much as the strawberry guava right now, but this one will be empty maybe every week. And then we got the ground cherry right here, aka Cape Gooseberry. This one will be empty maybe every 4 to 5 days. And then we got the goji berry right here, and this one is just starting to flower and starting to put on fruit. So I bet I'll notice this one start to use more water, and that'll be reflected in this water level here. Right now it's not doing a lot, but as it starts to produce more heavily, I'm sure I'll notice it. And it's just a really useful indicator, having that water level above ground. Especially since a lot of what I'm doing is experimental in a lot of ways. This is really great to learn about the plant's needs. Not to mention the difference in season, because it's summer right now. Today was a 90-degree day. So they're using more. So I'm reiterating myself now, but I have some here that don't have bottles yet. So I can just come along and fill up the bottle. This one's got some water in it still, you can see. And I just use this as an indicator. Even after it's empty, you still probably want to wait a little bit. You don't want to be overwatering necessarily, but at the same time, some other plants will want to be wet the whole time. You don't want to get some of this drying out, but some of that's just because of the weather. Like here, we've got some apples coming in. It's looking pretty nice. And over here, I'm trying it in my raised beds, and I think of all the ones where I'm trying it, this one has been the most successful. The plants here have taken to having the watering spikes in between each plant pretty nicely. These are some peppers right here. These are snacking peppers, so I've just got the spike in between the two plants. And I still, water the plants themselves when I fill up the spikes and the bottles, but this is kind of just a backup, so to speak. And I wouldn't go on the record saying that it's a perfect system, not by a long shot, but it seems to be helping. And again, I'm learning about how much water the plants need during the season when they're producing. Each time I go to fill it up, because I have a visual representation of how much they've drank. So it's just another tool out there. It's not the be all end all, but it could be an interesting solution, any particular thing you're trying to do. And I have found that they are a bit more affordable than Oyas. So yeah, it's something to explore if you're interested in different watering solutions. And then right here I have my corn that's kind of performing rather subpar, if you ask me. It's very short. I think I'm gonna get some pretty small cobs, but this is I've not had great success with corn up to this point, but this is probably the best I've seen so far. I need to create a better space for it. This was just kind of a I'll put it in and see what happens type of deal. I think next time I will have a better space with ideally better soil and better watering. I think the big deal here is not having adequate watering for it, and we'll probably see more success that time or next time. But this was a glass gem corn that I was trying out because they look beautiful and I wanted to try and grow that. That's the trend with most of what I try to grow, is I just try to grow things that seem interesting to me. Anyway, speaking of growing things that seem interesting to me, let me do an update on the mint. So I've had like 20 odd varieties of mint in the past, and some of them have kind of petered out and died on me, and some of them I have replaced and gotten going again. But let me just provide an update on that, because the mint videos have been some of the more engaged with ones on my channel. I know I've gotten lots of questions about them. So I've replaced my spearmint a couple times because it seems to be the most interesting to animals and insects. I've had this eaten back, I've had it dug up by a raccoon, but it is one of the ones that I want to maintain in the garden. So I think this might be my like 4th spearmint plant. So this is a new one getting established. That's why it's so small. And we got the peppermint. This one is a bit bigger. I need to give it a little bit of haircut because some of it's kind of scraggly looking. And that's kind of the story for a lot of these mints, is they're getting a little scraggly looking, and I need to give them a trim back. And so when you do that, you're going to get the plant to focus more on its roots. And in other climates, mints will die back during the winter and grow back when it starts to warm up again. So some people will suggest that you should simply chop it back intentionally so that it can focus on its roots and live through the winter in doing so. So this one is the chocolate mint, and I used to have all the tags to them, but it's cheap plastic and they got broken, so I replaced all the tags with handwritten ones. This one's going to flower right now, and some of them have different looking flowers, and they're pretty interesting. The insects love these flowers. This one is a mojito mint, and this one sometimes has variegated leaves, but right now I don't see any. And the pineapple mint has totally died. I would like to replace that one. I think one thing I want to do is repot all of these because I can remember the soil that I was using at the time was probably not a quality soil, so at some point I need to get out here and repot all my mints. The pineapple mint does look similar in a lot of ways to the mojito mint. It has kind of a fuzzy look to it, and it does have some variegation around the edge of the leaves at times. And then my next one here, the banana mint, it's looking okay. Let me get this weed out of here that it's competing with. Go on. This one kind of has some fuzziness to it. I wouldn't say this one necessarily smells like banana. Sometimes with these, just reading the name kind of suggests the flavor or scent to you, and then you kind of think that it smells that way because you read the name. We got the strawberry one. This one does kind of remind me of strawberries. It's not a one-to-one, but it's pretty close. And then we got the apple mint. This is one that's kind of getting on the scraggly side, so I think I should chop this one back so that it can come back stronger, because this is not looking too hot, honestly. It's going to flower here, and so this is not the first one we've seen that has gone to flower. So people will suggest that you shouldn't plant different mints together because the flavors slash scents will sort of commingle, and they'll begin to smell slash taste similar. And I think part of the reason for that may be they may be cross-pollinating. You see this flower is right next to this flower, so insects may be going from one to the next, and if they drop their seeds, those seeds could, in theory, reseed these plants, and you would have a sort of hybrid between our strawberry mint and our apple mint. But I am not at this time worried about that, especially since a lot of these flowers are reaching over. If they were to go to seed, I'd probably just dump it on the ground, but I'm gonna come through here and chop these back anyway, so I'm not worried about that aspect, or possibility rather. So this one is called a sweet pear mint, and it's getting a little scraggly. And then we got the ginger mint, which is another one that I quite like. These flowers look a bit different from one of the other ones we saw earlier. You see this? This is more of a kind of conal shape on the tips of the leaves, and these ones are kind of on the sides or between the nodes, you could say. So they grow differently. They may be more distantly related, perhaps. I am not a mint expert, I'm just an enthusiast. This one has one on the tip. This is the orange mint. And this is another one where I do think it is similar. I don't have any, well, let me see. So the scent is going to be better on the fresher leaves. The older the leaves are, the less potent it is. So yeah, on the fresher leaves, it does kind of have a orange reminiscence to it. But on the older leaves, they just kind of have a menthol-y scent. And my next one here, this is a lemon mint, and I am not sure. This one might be dead. You know, it is what it is. I'm not worried about it. Some of my mints I do want to replace. Some of them I don't have a lot of emotional attachment to. So I may or may not replace the lemon mint. If I find one easily, then I might grab it. Or rather, I think I'll probably wait and see if this one comes back. But we'll see how it goes. We got the grapefruit mint right here, and it's kind of dying back too. It's doing okay. It could be doing better. I think it comes back to the soil may not be as great for this one either. So they could use some work across the board. But the object with getting 20 odd mints was to kind of expose myself to the different scents, tastes, not necessarily to keep them all forever. I wanted to see which ones I liked the best and maybe focus on those ones. So we got some other ones that died back, and these ones have been gone for a little while, so I don't think they're going back. This was the Mexican mint and the Spanish mint. And then next up we got the Swiss mint. And it's doing okay. It could be doing better again. Here we got the basil mint. And this one, if I remember correctly, does have a basil-esque scent to it. And then the Thai mint, I'm pretty sure is gone for good. I may or may not replace that one. And this one didn't have any super special name. It was the Cordifolia mint. It kind of reminds me, I think this one may be a variety of spearmint. That's what it reminds me of. But I got a couple more behind me. So we have catmint, and it is my understanding that catmint and catnip are not the same thing, but they are kind of talked about interchangeably. But this one is called catmint. And it has like a... I know I'm using the same hand to rub all these leaves. I get called out on that. In my previous videos, I tried to wash my hands between takes so that it was a more genuine sampling. And these leaves are kind of aged at this point, so they're not going to be so great for sampling. But this one has a pretty, at its current stage, it has a pretty smooth scent. And then we can't forget about the fish mint. It's totally different from the others, but it is called a mint. And now I have a mixture of fish and catmint on my hand. So that's an interesting combination. So I have a couple others that I can share that I have grown from seed on my seed rack here. This is a pennyroyal, which is a variety of mint that I was told about by a commenter, and it has been sprawling here. Let's see if I can get an unbiased sample with some of my other fingers here. It's more of a cooler scent. It's kind of icy, so take from that what you will. And it kind of reminds me of like an icy mint gum. And then this one right here, this might be like a lemon balm or something. I'm not 100% sure. I need to do like a leaf identification or something. But this one I found just growing in the ground in my yard, and I identified it as some type of herb, but I'm not 100% sure what it is. But I've had comments from different viewers telling me about their mints that they've recovered, just that they've found growing wild, and I love that story. I love hearing about herbs that people have just found growing because it's so unique. But that's the state of the mint right now. I'm sure I'll get comments from people that are telling me I'm not taking care of my mints. I know. I'm kind of leaving them to their own devices in some cases here. And I do want to get out here and repot them and give them a better life. It's on the to-do list, don't worry. But at this point I have experienced a lot of different varieties of mint, so I feel like I've gained a lot of knowledge, I should say, in terms of the different mints, and I have more narrowed down which ones I prefer. I would say I like the spearmint, the peppermint, and the chocolate mint. These were the first three that I ever had, and I like some of the strawberry and then the citrus ones. I like the apple mint, so I will probably focus more on those. And if I find more varieties of mint, I may or may not pick them up, but I'm not as obsessed with them as I have been in the past. So I don't feel the need to hyper collect 20 plus varieties of mint at this stage, but I am really glad that there's so much passion behind it from people online, so I love that. And I do my best to answer questions about them as I get them, and because this has been a learning process for me for the mints. So yeah, I hope that that's an interesting update, and I'll repot these and hopefully give them a new lease on life, give them a haircut and all that. But that's where they are right now. So the next thing I want to show are some more cooler climate plants. I showed the ribes earlier, the gooseberries and the currants. So I got those from an East Coast nursery. I think that's based out of the Finger Lakes areas. And I have some others from nurseries over there that I've acquired to see how they can perform on the West Coast. And so these are American persimmons. I've got 4 here. These 2 woke up a lot sooner than these 2. So this one has not started leafing yet, but this one just recently did. So it's super interesting to see different seedlings. I think these ones woke up probably like 4 months ago or even earlier than that, but this one hasn't, and this one's just started. So that's really interesting that it took so long for them to wake up. I'm curious how our difference of seasons has affected these. And then some other more eastern climate plants. We have some pawpaws here. I've got 3 of them. These are part of the annonas. They are one of the more larger fruits that are native to North America. You might be more familiar with cherry moya. That's an annona fruit. They are more tropical, so this is the only annona that's from North America, and it's more shaped like a mango, sort of, whereas all the other annonas have kind of more funky looking shapes. But then moving on here, we have a service berry. This is the smoky variety. And keeping with the trend of growing things just to see how they'll do, this is another more cooler climate crop, or tree rather. This is a Schisandra, and it woke up pretty much as soon as I planted it a few months ago, but then promptly seemed to die on me. So I am not sure if it is still alive, maybe at the roots. I am leaning towards it being dead. There, I snapped off the top. But I can get another one and try again. That's what you do when something doesn't work. You learn from it and make adjustments, try again. This is an aronia. This is a type of berry. And this one's going to take some time to get established, I think, but that'll be interesting if I can get those going. I do like to try and get lots of different varieties of berries in my garden. I'll show more of the berries as we get across the yard. Oh, speaking of berries, I got my coffee right here, and if you didn't know, coffee beans come from a coffee berry. So at some point, I've had this plant for a few years now. It hasn't flowered, but I did recently repot it, so I think it might give me some flowers sometime soon, and hopefully I'll be able to take those berries from it, and maybe, if I want to put a lot of effort into it, because producing coffee is a lot of labor, if I want to invest that labor, then I can try out the process of making coffee from scratch. But and then again, I have another watering spike here. It's another one that needs a bottle. We got the begonias that are in bloom. They're really pretty. So over here is my greenhouse, and this is one of the things that I have been wanting to talk about for a while. I made a different version of this greenhouse, but it was not, so this is obviously a kit that I bought, but I first tried to build kind of a bootleg greenhouse out of stakes and like a tarp, and unfortunately it was not stable, and I really tried to make it work, but the elements would take it down each time I tried to improve it. So I ended up finding a kit that fit this space, and this is what I've got now. And I'm very happy with the way it turned out. So without further ado, let me get this unzipped. So this is in fact 2 greenhouses stitched together. It's the same kit, but I've just kind of folded the doors of these right and left sides of the two kind of into each other. And I need to reattach this part to the wall behind my reflector here, but so yes, I have this reflector here to kind of help maintain some light, because a lot of it gets cut down by having this here. And then this is where I have been experimenting with tropicals. So I've got my thermometer here, I've got another one on the other side. So I'm doing a lot of tropicals in here, and it's also kind of where I'm trying to rehabilitate some plants that have not done well. Like, I think these are dead, but I really gave them a chance and tried to save them. So I've killed some avocados in my time. It happens. I have some new avocados that are doing okay over here, but these ones I've been trying to rehabilitate, and I think they're gone at this point. But I don't like to give up on plants, you know. I like to try to save them if I can, but I think they're gone. So this is a peach that I grew from seed. These are apples that I grew from Granny Smith fruit. And these are some pomegranates that are kind of branching all over the place, going crazy. This is a star fruit that was doing great up until maybe a couple weeks ago, and its leaves died back, so not sure if it's dead. I don't think it is. I think it just got stressed out and couldn't hack it, so I'm waiting for that one to respond. And then these are, as I said, some avocados. These are ones I grew from seed. I may do some grafting onto these. Most of these are from Haas. This one's a reed. This one's a fuerte. Actually, I think this fuerte is one of the few plants that did not recover. They had some root rot issues, and I repotted them in some different soil, and they've responded really well to it. But I think that one was a little too far gone. So it is what it is. You learn from it, and you try not to make those mistakes in the future. This is a pecan that's responded really well to being repotted in better soil. That's a carob. This one is kind of suffering from some root rot as well. It may not recover. It is what it is. You do your best. This little guy that's falling over is a moringa. This is ridiculous. Oh my goodness. I need to get a bigger stake for it, apparently. It's just falling over in the walkway. So, I've got some pretty hyper tropicals in this greenhouse. This is a breadfruit, which is not something you can grow in California generally, but it is so far been pretty happy in this greenhouse. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then over here I have some poinsettias that I've been rehabilitating, and they've really turned a corner here and come back, so I'm happy with that. These are, I believe these are jelly palms. I've talked about one that I have in my front yard, and these ones were not faring well outside the greenhouse, but so I recently moved them in, and we will see if they respond well to not having their leaves dried out so much, because I've kept having to clip off these leaves because they keep drying out. So here I have a lot of tropical seedlings that I am experimenting with. We got some jackfruit here, and these are going to need to be repotted soon as they make their way up towards the ceiling of the greenhouse. And then these are, I mentioned the breadfruit. I have a relative of it, the bread nut. So the breadfruit is a seedless version, and the bread nut has seeds. And these are pretty hyper tropicals that you'll find in island regions. So breadfruit is kind of a big deal for island regions and tropical regions because it's a really good food source. It really closes the gap on food scarcity in some of these regions. And I did a video about breadfruit as well, but I want to explore those topics more in the future. So I'm experimenting with growing them here in my greenhouse. And then next to it I have cacao, aka the chocolate tree. I have two varieties. I have a Trinitario in the back and a Criollo in the front. So the Criollo is the more wild one that is associated with higher quality chocolate. The problem is it's more sensitive to different growing conditions, and it dies easier. There's various things. I'm paraphrasing, but that it's less common for cheaper chocolate. It's more associated with more craft chocolates and gourmet chocolates and things like that. Trinitario, the other variety that I have, that is going to be more commonly used. And then another variety, Forastero, that's going to be more commonly used in the making of chocolate. You're not often going to see Criollo used in more commonly available chocolates. And then right here I'm growing more moringa. These guys really took off. This is my second kind of sowing of moringa. The first one didn't work out, but this one did, so I'm happy with that. Right here, you might not be able to see it, but I am trying out growing strawberries from seed for my first time, and I've got little guys popping up here, little tiny strawberry seedlings. So if they can make it, that'll be another interesting experiment. Below here I have some cuttings I'm killing. I did a lot of fig cuttings and I messed something up. I've had varying degrees of success with fig cuttings, and I think I just messed something up this time. I'm no master of doing cuttings, but that one in the back doing okay. This is a mulberry cutting, which might be on the ropes here. These are some cherimoya seedlings that have been really tenacious. I kind of abandoned these in the side yard. I had like 30 or 40 cherimoya seedlings, and they were just pretty much unkillable. I say unkillable to a point. They were kind of struggling along for months and months and months with little to no water or care, and I finally decided to revisit them. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I had those over there. So I took the best of the best and repotted them, and I'm actually trying to do something with them at this point. And some of them died, so I do have the remnants of those really hardy seedlings that survived being pretty much abandoned. So we'll see how these turn out as they grow. I have some more avocados that I'm growing from pit, and some rambutan and lychee that haven't sprouted yet. Over here I have some mangoes and papaya. Papaya are super easy from what I've seen. This mango is sprouted. I have some mamey that I planted. They haven't sprouted yet. These are blood orange seedlings. This right here, if I can zoom in on it, this is a seedling of something called an organ pipe cactus, aka the Mexican pitaya. Look at that little tiny guy. I went through the work of processing the seeds from a fruit, and I have gotten some seedlings to come up. And then there's a little one over there too. So these guys turn into big honkin' organ pipe cactuses, and they're called organ pipe cactus because they resemble the instrument, or so people say. And they just get huge until they fall over, and then, you know, they start growing again from their side. That's how a lot of cactuses operate. And then down here, so I got a lot of tropicals here, as you can see. I also kind of use this space as kind of a security for my seedlings so that they're not dug through by birds or animals. I also have a seedling spot in the garage with like some grow lights and stuff, but this is my outdoor area that's got some security. So I want to, it is my intent to do a lot more with milkweed, because if you haven't heard, the monarch butterfly has been changed to endangered. So I want to do more with milkweed and, you know, do what I can for him. So this is just a couple flats that are seed trays that I've sown for milkweed, and, you know, get the process started. But anyway, this is my greenhouse. Some dead stuff, some live stuff, some stuff I'm learning from. I am very happy with the way this got set up. Oh, but I'm burying the lead here. You might have wondered, why in the world did you put this greenhouse in the, like, hallway, or rather the side of the house where you can't get past it unless you unzip it? So the reason I did this is because I wanted to get this vent right here from the dryer. So I am harvesting the waste heat and moisture that comes out of this vent when the dryer runs. And this, I have already seen this be really beneficial for the tropicals here, and this is going to be great for when they try to survive the winter because when the dryer runs, it's just pumping heat and moisture into this greenhouse and being trapped. So that was the master plan of having this greenhouse here on the side next to the house. If it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have put it here in the way and making this area impassable. But I am very happy with the way this greenhouse turned out, and also the fact that this ridiculous idea with the vent worked out so well, because if I come out here while it's running, this whole thing is just full of moisture, and this humidity meter spikes to like 85, so it matches a more tropical region. Like if you were in the tropics, you would have your temperature and humidity would be much more similar. Like you might have 85 humidity and 85 on the temperature, and when the dryer is running, those pretty much line up, and it's really neat to see this ridiculous idea of mine work in practice. So it's created an opportunity to experiment with these hypertropicals. So I really like that. So feel free to take that idea. I am sure I'm not the first person to think about it. Other people will do geothermal to harvest the waste heat for a greenhouse in that way. But this is just another way to harvest heat from an energy source for a greenhouse that has really worked out. So yeah, that's the greenhouse. So since I'm walking past it, let me show you kind of a pot graveyard right here. This was a guava that didn't make it through a winter. That's how I learned that they are not very winter hardy. Duh. This was a Greek columnar basil. And then these were various experiments. And I think what I learned from some of these is that I learned a lot about soil types. But this is this is the graveyard. I used to have some tea plants in these. That was when I learned they couldn't handle my winter. I have a new tea plant right here because I really want to grow tea, but it has not completely left the experimental stage and entered a sort of production and growing phase. I'm still learning about them, still killing them, But moving on from that, I talked about the pineapples earlier and shown these little guys. These have not fully rooted. They are looking better than they did. I wasn't sure these were going to survive, but they have. But let me show off all the other pineapples. So some of these are getting really big. This one's getting much bigger. And they are a more succulent plant, so they don't need to be watered that often, but they do appreciate it. So I kind of don't give them a lot of attention, but I'll water them here and there. They get watered as other things get watered. But they've been doing fine. It's one of those things that is kind of ridiculous to grow in your garden because you're going to get like one fruit every like year and a half to 2 years. So it's like, it's not worth it, but it is kind of fulfilling to try it, and experiment with it and just see how they grow. And so far so good. Some of them, they were all in different stages because I got these from Pineapple Tops and started them that way. So some of them are much bigger than others, but they have taken really well to being here, and I did repot them. That took some time actually because I have over a dozen. That took me a few hours to repot all of these. It was a lot of work. Actually, they might need some watering because these leaves are drying out here. But some of them are looking really good. And I was thinking about planting those little tiny ones in the cups in the ground and seeing how it fares, seeing what the difference is. But that's the state of the pineapples right now. This little tiny one totally unnecessary for it to be in this big pot, but I had this one already that the one that was in here died. I had so many, some of them died, and so I just plopped a new top in it. And that's why there's a tiny one in a big pot. But that's the pineapples right now. I'll probably show them off again as they start to get bigger, and they get wide too, so I'll probably have to move them as they get bigger. So I talked about the papayas a little bit when we were in the greenhouse, but let me show you another spot where I'm sprouting them. This spot has done a lot better. Well, I should say this spot was started sooner, not that it's done better, but some of these are much further along. So I just took, an entire fruit's worth of seeds and just scattered it here, and then, came back later, a few weeks later, how long was it? It was a few weeks to over a month. I wasn't sure if they were actually going to sprout because I've never done this before. But they came up, and a lot of them are doing great. This one's the tallest right now, so I could just pluck this out and plant it somewhere else. It is kind of ridiculous for them to all be growing in here. It's not going to be a permanent spot by any means, but it's a good place to get them started. So if you want to start papaya seeds, you can just, take all the seeds from a fruit and kind of spread them out, or just throw them in the yard and see what happens. From what I understand, papayas have very shallow roots, and they get very top heavy and are, prone to their roots getting really loose if the soil gets wet. So it's suggested that papayas are given some kind of support as they get taller, or do that support, put them in a place where they can get support to begin with, because they are prone to falling over, and they can cause damage to buildings or fences or what have you when that happens. So just be aware of that. But I think I'm going to pluck this one out and put it someplace else. This is yet another ridiculous and interesting experiment for me. I do have a couple other varieties. So those ones were grown from seed, but I have bought some papayas from the big box store. So this, the one I got had 3 in it, and I separated them out and put them in their own pots. However, I need to repot them because I don't think this soil is good for them. They look very sickly, and from what I understand, they should be producing, at least producing flowers at this stage, at this size, and they have not. So they're not doing too hot. So I think I need to repot them, and from what I understand, they should turn the corner and bounce back pretty quickly once you get them in soil that they like. Because I think right now they're just kind of getting their getting root rotty in this current soil. But we'll see when I get around to repotting them. That's another thing I need to do. But those are the papayas. So I can show you more of my watering spikes and bottles here. Some of these plants responded really well to having them, even though I was watering pretty adequately previously. Like my roses here, I was watering them at a pretty regular rate, but when I put in the spike, it responded much better to that. I think that suggests to me that it preferred the more regular watering to a more boom and bust watering cycle. Because I know a lot of times, at least for me, I can't water every day. So when I do water, it's more of a boom and bust cycle. So I think it appreciated having a more regular, consistent water, and it has just bushed out in response. And these are very beautiful. I've mentioned this before, but these are the black Baccara roses. At least at the time when I learned about them, they were one of the darker roses. They have kind of a velvety look to their petals, which I think is pretty neat. I would like to get more roses in the garden at some point, but right now I've just got my favorite one. So I want to give an update on the dragon fruit now that we're here. So let me see here. First, that is not how that should be. I just have one cutting hanging off. I'll come back to that. So right away here, if you want your dragon fruit to focus on growing upward or focus on fruiting, you may want to take off all these little growths. So I'm just going to toss that. But anyway, so I have 4 dragon fruit pots and these trellises here all around this kind of square area. This was intended as a jacuzzi or spa spot, but there has not been one here for quite a while. Under this fake rock, there's like a cord for it. Anyway, I digress. I have 4 big 30-gallon pots with these dragon fruit trellises. I learned how to build these from Kevin Espiritu's Epic Gardening videos and Grafting Dragon Fruits YouTube videos as well. So those are both good resources for not only learning about dragon fruit, but how to make these trellises. And this is not the only version of a dragon fruit trellis. There are many different versions that I've seen, and you don't even need a trellis. You can let it climb up your tree or whatever you want to do. But the way these behave is they will climb and look for the sun and just kind of sprawl. And when you have a trellis like this, ideally they're gonna climb up and sprawl over the trellis, which is what is going on here. This trellis has the most vigorously grown set of dragon fruits. So on each trellis I have 4 different varieties, and the idea with that is, in theory, you're going to have different flowers with possibly different pollination requirements. There are different types of dragon fruit that are self-pollinating, and different types that are not self-pollinating, and they may be self-infertile, which means they need to be pollinated by a different compatible dragon fruit. So that was the idea with putting different varieties in the same pot, is the flowers, assuming they're flowering around the same time, they would have the opportunity to be cross-pollinated and have a better fruit set. That's the whole theory and practice behind that. Some of these are getting kind of ridiculously huge. I did do a big prune job on these, and that's what all the cuttings were from at my workstation back there. I kept all the best cuttings, and I'll root those and make new dragon fruit plants. But I recently moved these. These were in a different spot in the yard where they were not getting as much sun. So now that they've been moved to this concrete pad, they're getting much more sun, and I got to see my first dragon fruit buds and first flower recently, a few weeks ago. But when I went to look up the particulars on the variety that was flowering, it turned out that one was supposedly self-infertile, which means that it cannot be pollinated with its own pollen. And since I didn't have another dragon fruit blooming at the time, or I didn't have any pollen that I could pollinate it with, I suspected that it was not going to set that fruit. And the variety in question was this one here, the this is a Spanish word, guys. Sin Espinus was the variety. And it did abort the flower. It's right here. It fell off the plant. Very sad, but it is what it is. Hopefully we'll see more flowers this year. If not, then I am certain we'll see some next year because of how vigorous these things have been and how well they've done. But that is the state of the dragon fruit right now. I'm pretty happy with the progress. I have been asked, how long does it take for these to set fruit? And it can take a long time if you are starting from a cutting. It could be well over a year for your plant to develop enough to make fruit. And then it's also a question of, do you have a variety that is self-fertile and self-pollinating? And then, that could be another factor. But this is where the dragon fruit stand right now. I hope you thought that was interesting. Next, I wanted to talk about my sugarcane, which is yet another ridiculous experiment because they are not quite suited to this climate. They'll grow here, sure, but they're not going to grow like they would, say, in the south or in the tropics or in Hawaii. So this was an experiment, growing these from cuttings. I just rooted a bunch of cuttings that I got I got a stalk from the market down the street, and I just cut that into a bunch of different nodes, and I rooted all those nodes, and then I buried the nodes, and waited probably over a month, and I was like, oh no, did it just rot in the soil? But it did not. So I have different stalks coming up here, and you got to be careful because sugarcane, at least this variety, has serrated leaves, so if you walk past them they might scratch you up. But it's doing well so far. I'm sure I'll have a canopy in this center area here pretty soon. It's going to be between the figs here, the sugarcane, and then my asparagus. I'm going to create like a canopy in the center of this concrete pad. Which is great because I do want some of these other things to be shaded. But the sugarcane is coming along nicely. I think it probably would prefer more water and a more humid climate, as you can tell from these leaves starting to curl like this. These will probably start to dry up. So far so good. I have successfully got some small sugarcane. Time will tell if they'll get tall in my climate. They might not be able to make it that tall. In a pot, too. I think they probably only get like maybe yay big because, you know, in a climate that's not suited for them and that's in a pot. So it is what it is. I think I've learned from it, and it's probably a successful experiment at this point. So now it's just seeing how well it can do in the limitations that this environment presents for it. Yeah, that's the sugarcane. So over here, I have done a lot of work on this area recently. There used to be a bunch of bamboo here, and in some respects I'm still fighting the bamboo. I took the best clumps from it and potted them, and it did not like that initially, but it's recovering. Anyway, this area is, my intent is to make it a vining plant area. I have 3 different brambles here. We got a boysenberry, a thornless blackberry, and a raspberry. And then we got the passion fruit, we got a kiwi, and then we got 3 varieties of grapes. And then, you know, again, I have watering spikes in each of them until such a time that I can get around to doing drip. But it's been a pretty good system so far. So on this grape on the end, you can see it kind of colonizing the fence here. There it goes. It's gonna grow. It's all the way down there, and it's growing past this palm over here. So it is happy with its situation, I can tell. I'm not sure how sustainable that is. Probably not very, because if a big long vine growing along the fence is being supplied by just this pot, we might have some issues eventually, but I'm letting it go nuts for the time being. But really, this area is just going to be probably, you know, the immediate trellis that I have set up on the fencing, and that's going to be kind of the area for each of these. I know that each of these plants can easily take over this entire fence on their own, so I'm going to have to manage this probably a lot. But this is the plan for the moment, and to see how they do. And we got a lot of new growth on these grapes, and this kiwi is a new addition as well. It's wrapping around all over the place. I did have some passion fruit flowers, but they dropped off. I think it's just a little stressed out. And I'm fine with them mixing a little bit on these borders between the pots. That's fine. And I will have to be conscious of it kind of going over the neighbor's fence. But I'm going to have kind of columns of these different vining plants here. And ideally, it'll probably be next year, we'll be seeing some fruit on these. But that's the crazy plan that I've set up. And there are some signs that it's working, as evidenced by the grapes getting out of control. But we shall see. I'll have some updates with these going forward. So we got other things here. I got 4 types of blueberries. This is a pink lemonade blueberry. It's growing really vigorously, but hasn't produced much. It's kind of past its time, I think. This one is producing a little bit, but they're really small, so I think I just need to water it more. I would like to repot these as well. And then over here I've got some pumpkins that I'm killing because I have not been watering them enough. I kind of have a stopgap with the watering spikes, but it only provides so much for them. I think they're not able to access it as well as you would hope. It's much more effective for a potted plant. So in the raised bed, it's not as great. And this raised bed in particular has kind of been the scourge of my existence because it's got some invasive bamboo, the same bamboo that I was talking about that I took out in order to put in these pots here. It's kind of made its way into this raised bed and is colonizing and taking moisture away from other plants. And the other thing that I didn't think about when I set up this raised bed is it is next to a freaking tree, guys. This was not smart on my part. So I think what I'm gonna eventually do is do a big old reset on this raised bed, take the whole thing out, because every time I, kind of do some exploratory digging in here, I run into roots. I think the tree is rooting into this raised bed, and it's always super obvious in hindsight when you explain this stuff, but if you plant next to a tree, then the tree is going to be drawing nutrients and moisture from what you've planted there, and the things you've got are not going to do as well. So I've got these pumpkins kind of petering out because A, it's super hot, and B, it's competing for resources with a frickin' tree and bamboo. So this raised bed is not very good. So at some point we're gonna reassess. I know this one has some serious issues. I'm not happy with it at all. But moving on from there, I have some jicama here. This is a vining plant. You can see it kind of grappling on to the trellis here. If you've never seen a jicama, it's sort of like a potato, but not. Similar usage, but it's a bit different. They are really good with just some spices. You can slice them up. You don't even have to cook them. You can just eat them raw. And I don't know if I'm going to have a great crop. Probably not. But this is more just to see what I'm capable of growing with jicama. Next to it, I got some sweet potato. This one likes to grow out of control. It's kind of dying back right now. I think at this point I could probably dig in and see what I've got. But this guy I grew from one little slip that I grew out of a sweet potato. So this one had some humble beginnings and has been, growing bigger and bigger month over month. So this was a fun one to start, because when you think about how you started it and where it is now, it's just fun to look back on. I'm sure this will get much bigger over time, and from what I understand, sweet potatoes can just colonize your yard if you allow them to, and they just become a nuisance for some people. But right now I have it kind of quarantined in this tote that I drilled some holes in and repurposed as a raised bed. Next to it I have another root crop. This is a Sunchoke, or also known as a Jerusalem artichoke. It's a type of sunflower that is more used for its roots. It's another one that can be used similar to a potato. And I think this year I'm not going to harvest them. I think I'm just going to allow it to be more established. This is another one where I have the watering spike, but yet again, the watering spike is not the be-all end-all. It's not going to service this whole pod. It's just kind of, like you could tell, like this stalk is not doing so hot, whereas the ones next to the watering spike are doing better. So it's not a be-all end-all watering solution, but it can help in some cases. So it's a good tool to have in the chest. But that's the Sunchokes. And then, around the corner, I have some peppers that are doing all right, but mostly it's the tomatoes are just kind of petering out and dying back. There's not a lot going on over here. It's kind of just getting started on re-gearing this area. So here I actually have some Chayote that I have started to get established. It's kind of, I am sure that this is past the time to be planting a Chayote. Not to mention they're not 100% great for this climate, but as with many other things, I like to experiment with it just to see what happens, because you never know. So this guy was the most vigorous one that I planted. This whole vine was growing out of this while I still had it in the little pot. So I just plopped the whole thing in the ground, and it's gotten off to a pretty vigorous start. We'll see if it continues. I think as it starts to cool down, later in the fall rather, it's probably gonna die back. But as I understand it, Chayote can die back to the ground and then come back up again. They're more of a perennial plant. So what I would like to do is try and get them established and see if they'll come back for me. But we'll see. We'll see how this experiment goes. But that's pretty much most of the big stuff that's going on in the garden. I have some citrus here. We got some kumquats coming in. Happy with that. I like kumquats a lot. More flowers here. Citrus flowers smell really great. But that's pretty much it. That's I got some annuals I'm working on. I need to do some more sowing. I always drag my feet on sowing seeds because I'm much more focused on perennials, but I do want to get annuals going. It's just I got to get out here and do it. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I got some seed trays ready to go. I just gotta put seeds in them. But yeah, that's how the garden is right now. If you stuck with me this whole time, then thank you. And I'll see you next time when I do one of these big long videos.